Hello, we're joined here today by Murali Ranganathan, who works for Nokia, heading up their SON business product management. We're here to discuss SON and automation.
The SON, or self-organizing networks, has two parts to it. The first part is distributed SON, which runs in the radio, and it's provided generally by the radio vendors. And then you have a centralized portion that runs on the network management layer that looks across the network on a wider scale, so that it can optimize a large part of the network rather than just a single unit B or single unit B cell. SON was defined by the standards, by 3GPP, and they had three aspects of SON that they had defined in the standards. The first aspect is called self-configuring systems or self-configuring networks, which deals with automatic parameter management, automatic configuration of unit Bs when they first come up in the air. And the second part is self-optimizing, which deals with looking at key performance indicators or PM counters, and based on that we optimize certain network parameters so that the drop calls or missing handovers, those type of issues in the network are rectified. The third part of SON is self-healing, which deals with dealing with sick cells. So if a cell is, sometimes it's called sleeping because it's not responding to users that are trying to get onto the network. And so we recognize those patterns and those conditions, and we try to recover that cell that's determined to be sleeping. So those are the three main aspects of SON as defined by the standards. Now, when you look at the different technologies that we deal with today, we have 2G, 3G, LTE, and we're talking about moving to 5G. But 2G and 3G, we didn't have techniques where Bs or these cells can communicate with each other. So we had to move the intelligence to an upper layer, which is the CSON or centralized SON layer, and all the functions happen at that layer. Whereas in LTE, we were smart enough to create certain interfaces between these cells so that cells can talk to each other. So there is an element of distributed SON that became possible in LTE. And but if you have to optimize across technologies, today no network operator has just one technology. As you know, they have all their legacy technologies and they're adding LTE and 5G eventually. So if you have to cohesively work across all these technologies, then you have to move the intelligence higher up in the network, and that's where centralized SON comes into play. Nokia has a product called EdenNet, which is a centralized SON product. As a radio vendor, we do have functionality that resides in the radio, but centralized SON is all about understanding that there is functionality in the radio, recognizing there's value in adding additional intelligence on the centralized layer, and making the two work together holistically. That's what EdenNet does, and that's what it's great at.
And how do you see SON as of today?
Yeah, what we have as SON operating in our customers' networks today started back in 2012 with leading operators such as KDDI, who were forward-thinking, and they decided at the time that a network had to be continuously optimized in order to take on the challenges of introducing a new technology such as LTE and a new device experience such as the iPhone. So when KDDI introduced the iPhone in 2012, they saw SON as an essential element of keeping their networks continuously optimized, and so they introduced SON to perform that role. And Nokia delivered a centralized SON solution in 2012, about 3 months prior to their iPhone launch, and that was widely successful, and that system continues to operate till today. The other aspect of SON that we see today is the wealth of use cases that we have. By use cases, I mean functions that manage the capacity and coverage of networks in an optimized manner, dealing with handovers and making sure that when a user moves from one cell to another cell, he does not have a degraded experience, right? He does not drop a call, he doesn't have to reattempt to call somebody again. And those aspects of SON are well covered today in the SON solutions that we've deployed. And the main, a very important aspect of SON is the acceptance by operators. And 2016 is the year where we see SON deployed in a mass manner. A lot of the operators have accepted SON as an essential part of their network operations, and it has also won the trust of the operators. So this is an automated system. Users from our operators' networks are used to having control over the networks, which means they were manually changing things in the past, which took a lot of effort, but they felt confident at the end of the day that they knew what they were doing. It was the right thing to do. To trust software to replace them was a challenge. And today, the software we have through Ethernet has proven that it's reliable and customers have accepted it. And 2016 is going to be the defining year for SON because of the wide acceptance. And starting here and moving on to the future, we see that SON is established now, and then we have a lot of new opportunities coming up. The next area of focus for us is moving from network-wide optimization to per-subscriber optimization, so we understand the experience of a particular individual subscriber, and we optimize his experience, and we'll make sure that every user has the best possible, data experience or voice experience or messaging experience in the network. SON has gained wide acceptance amongst many of our operators, and it's widely deployed now. And I would say that 2016 is the year where SON has finally arrived, and it's here to stay. And we've launched many networks with SON with different operators worldwide.
So you've spoken about where we are here today in 2016.
Right.
Where will we be in 2020?
Yeah, so today SON has proved its value in automating the network as we know it today. And most of the automation that we've offered today is basically automating the past as we see it. So we've had tried and proven ways of optimizing the network that network operators have used in the past, and we have automated that, and that's working well. Where we see SON today is a role that SON plays in defining the automation needs of the future. Right? So, and the network of the future is moving towards 5G and moving towards the networks are moving towards the cloud, and SON plays a role in making sure that SON becomes the anchor in migrating the networks to the cloud and to 5G. We also see SON becoming the orchestrator. So there are different aspects of managing an end-to-end network. A part of it is the radio optimization, but there's also an important element of optimization of the backhaul and the core network as well. And we need to orchestrate the type of automation that happens across all these layers. So we tend to call that end-to-end automation, and that is something that will be fulfilled between now and 2020.
So what's your vision or dream for the future?
My vision for the future is that with SON, there will be no more drop calls. There will be no more missed conversations because of that. All the messaging and communications that happen between loved ones and people will continue interrupted. And then when we have important conversations happening through voice or video, that will remain disrupted. So there's no disruption in the experience that users have while using the mobile network or their smartphones. This is achieved through extreme automation, as well as through some of the self-learning techniques and artificial intelligence type applications that we will introduce in SON. And we also see a world where the human is freed from repetitive tasks, where in order to operate a network, nobody has to be watching a video screen all the time in order to make sure that the network is working without a problem or without flaws. SON is there to take care of every little detail in making sure that the network operates smoothly and gives every user, everything that's connected to the network, a uniform experience, independent of what type of application they're using or what time of day they're using the application. So that's our vision, to make sure that nobody has a different experience with the network, from time A to time B. They forget that they're communicating across an ocean or across long distances. We want to bring the experience where people communicate in a way that they think that they're talking to each other, standing in front of each other, like we are today, rather than a network separating them. So that's our vision. That's SON.
How do we define SON? Because it means so many different things to different people.
Right. So SON stands for self-organizing networks, and SON has two parts to it. There's the distributed SON that runs on the eNodeBs or the cells themselves, and that function is provided by the network vendors, the RAN vendors. And then you have centralized SON, which runs at a network management layer. And SON was first defined by the 3GPP standards, where they define three different facets or aspects of SON. The first aspect of SON is self-configuring networks, where we automatically provision parameters and make sure that all parts of your network have consistent settings so that they all work consistently and work together as well. The second part of SON is called self-optimizing networks, and that deals with looking at network performance indices, making sure that you maintain a certain level of performance in your network all the time. And when you see a certain degradation in the network, you make a configuration change and prevent that degradation from happening again. So you're restoring the network to perform uniformly at all times. The third aspect of SON is called self-healing. This is the case where you deal with sick cells. So when a cell goes sick, you may not be able to access it at all as a user. And in that case, we detect those conditions and we bring that cell back to life. In some cases, a part of the cell may be degraded, so you may get an alarm. And SON would detect that alarm, find out the root cause as to why that alarm happened in the first place, and then try to fix the cause of the problem and then recover the cell from that perspective. So those are the three aspects defined in the standards. Now, you also have different technologies. You have 2G, 3G, LTE, and all these technologies are all working together. Even though the distributed SON was introduced in LTE and that was built into the radios, if you have to have a holistic SON solution that covers all technologies, you have to perform or implement that SON function at the centralized level. So that's why centralized SON is an important aspect of running the network. In Nokia, we have this product called Nokia EdenNet, which is a centralized SON function. Even though Nokia also provides the radio and we build in the distributed SON inside the radios, we still see this need to have a centralized SON function that looks across technologies and holistically solves problems. And there has to be an interaction or a coordination between the distributed SON layers and the centralized SON layers, and Nokia calls that as hybrid SON. So a hybrid SON solution is what the industry really needs, because we're always coordinating between what's running at the radio layer and bringing in the knowledge from the radio layer and looking across technologies, across a larger swath of cells in order to solve problems holistically at that layer. To me, SON is all about holistic automation, looking at problems end-to-end, top-to-bottom, and making sure that we not only address network issues, but we also address the end-user experience. So by looking at a user that may be a VIP user, a user that expects has certain critical needs and expects that the network is available to him all the time. So we do understand and recognize those users and make sure that their experience is never degraded.
Now, we've spoken about where we are today in 2016 with wide acceptance.
Right.
Where do you think we'll be in 2020?
Yeah, what we see today in SON is a solution that has automated the past. So we have understood how network operators manage the systems in the past. A lot of tedious work had to be put in place in order to keep the network always optimized. And we have successfully taken that tedium out of the process, and we've automated all of that. And moving forward, we want SON to not just follow what has been done in the past, but to define the future of network transformation into two new areas. One is 5G, where customers expect higher throughput, they expect higher capacities from the network, a better user experience, where you have millisecond delays in getting content to the user. Getting into virtual reality type applications will require a 5G network which has low delays. And in order to implement that type of a network, we need automation to be thought about from the ground up. Right? Automation cannot be an afterthought. It has to be the centerpiece of the architecture that enables 5G and the migration to cloud solutions. So we believe SON will be right in the middle of that, directing the transformation, making sure that everything that we build understands that SON is a central element of the central intelligence of this transformation. One of the other aspects of SON that we have today is that the configuration changes or network changes that we make are reactive. So a problem has already happened, a user has already dropped his call, and we recover from it by making a configuration change in the network so that that type of problem doesn't happen, let's say, for the next foreseeable few hours or days. But we want to get to a point where we are more cognitive or more, let's say, predictive, so that before these problems occur, we're looking at patterns in the network, patterns that lead to failures, and by recognizing those patterns, we're able to fix the network before the problems happen. That is what we see happening in between now and 2020, where SON is self-learning, it's adapting itself to the environment and fixing issues before they happen.